Good evening and welcome to Freedom is a Constant Struggle with your host, Kilu Nyasha, and board opping is an Andrew Montoya on this April 21st, 2016. And I'm really delighted to bring back to Freedom is a Constant Struggle, Glen Ford. He's the co-founder and executive editor of Black Agenda Report, is a veteran of more than 40 years in broadcast, print, and internet journalism, is a former Washington bureau chief and White House, Capitol Hill, and State Department correspondent. He co-founded and hosted America's Black Forum, the first nationally syndicated Black news interview program on commercial television, launched and owned the radio syndications Black World Report, Black Agenda Reports, and Wrap It Up, the first national hip-hop music show. He has worked as a radio newsman in Washington, Baltimore, and Georgia, and produced over 1,000 radio and TV commercials. Ford has edited or served as staff reporter for 3 newspapers, was national political columnist for Encore, American and Worldwide News Magazine, founded the Black Commentator and Africana Policies magazines, and authored The Big Lie, an analysis of U.S. media coverage of the Grenada invasion. On the internet, Ford co-founded blackcommentator.com in 2002 and blackagendareport.com in 2006, a weekly magazine of news, commentary, and analysis from the Black left. Ford also hosts and produces the weekly 1-hour Black Agenda Report radio program on the Progressive Radio Network, as well as 2 weekly radio commentaries that air on approximately 40 radio stations. Welcome to Freedom, Glen Ford.
Well, thanks for the invitation and for allowing me a little time to speak.
Right on. Well, you speak so well, and you have lots to say. So why don't we start right off with the latest happenings in this campaign insanity?
Well, I suppose Bernie Sanders supporters all over the country are a little bit subdued, and we hear corporate media folks saying that Sanders and his campaign's moment of truth has arrived. But I don't think that's true. If we're talking about the moment of truth, meaning final realization that he's not going to win the Democratic presidential nomination, that has been clear from the very beginning. There never was really a ghost of a chance of Bernie Sanders ascending to the top of the stairs in Philadelphia in June. Understand, it is not just that he has a program that is a threat to the corporate forces that control the Democratic Party, just as they do the Republican Party, but he was going to be opposed inevitably by the party itself. The party itself, being a corporate animal, was going to react to this campaign as if it was some kind of foreign body in its midst and try to reject it. But the Hillary campaign, in fact, is funding at least 33 of the state Democratic parties who run these primaries. So when you run against the corporate representative, and that's Ms. Clinton, you're running against the Democratic Party as an institution, and you're running against Clinton's money 2 times. One in terms of her just as her as an opponent, and you're running against her in the form of the same party that you're trying to lead. So these were insurmountable obstacles. I was rooting for Bernie Sanders to do as well as he could under those circumstances, knowing that he was not going to get the nomination, and for his Sandinistas, as some folks like to call them, to get excited enough and determined enough and wishful thinking enough, enthusiastic enough, energetic enough that they might actually act upon the rhetoric of ridding the Democratic Party of the rule of the corporations, that they might actually stand up in Philadelphia and demand that the party be cleansed of its corporate connections. Now, this, of course, would be a miracle, but at least that they would try. And in the experience, a portion of them would emerge from that experience, understanding that the Democratic Party cannot be reformed from within, cannot be reformed from the bottom up, that this is impossible, and then would embark on a different kind of left politics, so that the process would yield something in terms of human resources and also be a huge public education. And I think it has done that, although it's not clear what will emerge from Philadelphia and the convention.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell, but it kind of reminds me of 1984 when the Democratic Party ran Jesse Jackson and had him basically organize all the alienated and disenfranchised and people who had pretty much given up on established politics and formed the Rainbow Coalition. So he brought so many people together. He even pulled me in for a minute. And then, of course, he was defeated on all four planks after he organized and brought in all these new constituents to the Democratic Party. The next thing you know, he's defeated on all four planks, and who emerges as the nominee but Mondale, for goodness sakes, who couldn't have won the dog catcher. So I think this is a very similar phenomenon in which Sanders is being used, with his socialist ideas, which I don't see how you can implement socialism within capitalism. But in any case, I think he's bringing in a lot of the alienated voters, the youth, and so on, and they will all be ushered in to ultimately throw their weight behind Hillary.
And some may not. And that some, we're talking about millions of people. And you need millions and millions of people in electoral politics, because all they do is one thing on one day and register their little digit. But you don't need millions and millions of people to do movement politics.
Right.
And if 10,000 new activist-minded folk could come, and I mean new, could come out of this, that would be a cornucopia. That would be a mother lode.
But I would like to
young folks.
I would like to see them, instead of throwing their weight behind Hillary, I would much rather see them leave the Democratic Party and organize a political revolution. Seize on Sanders' idea of a political revolution. He's calling for a political revolution. Well, they should put that into practice.
That's what I meant. I meant 10,000 leaving the Democratic Party
that would be great.
In disgust with that kind of education. And also, black folks in the main have stuck by Hillary, and we can talk about why that is.
Oh, goodness.
But in terms of 18 to 29-year-olds, a majority of 18 to 29-year-old blacks supported Bernie Sanders. And that is really significant in terms of black folks, because that is a willingness to break with the politics of fear that keeps black folks not just in the Democratic Party, but most often has blacks supporting the more right-wing politician that is vying for the nomination in the Democratic Party, the richer candidate, which means the one that's funded more by the corporations. And so this... To have a young demographic of folks who is at least willing to throw off those kinds of shackles means that Well, that's a good sign, and we should be able to harvest some good future black revolutionaries from that cohort. Now, we don't need all of them. We don't need more than a fraction of them. This is movement politics. You know, we never had them back in the day either.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to elaborate, I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on is the whole structure of of the electoral process and how and this whole business of delegates and super delegates and break it down to our viewers. How we really don't have one person, one vote in this country. Given the whole delegate thing and the primaries and the electoral college ultimately.
Well, because we have a duopoly, that is just two parties, both of them, of course, controlled by corporations, but that virtually all of the political activity goes through these two organizations. These parties have taken on responsibilities that are quasi-public. That is, if half of the electorate is voting based upon rules concocted by the Democratic Party, and another half is exercising its franchise, its political rights through another private organization, the Republican Party. Here we have basically the totality of the electoral political activity going through, being filtered through, being managed by two private organizations. And yet most folks don't even think of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party as being private organizations, but they are. They make up their own rules. They are not obligated to reflect one person, one vote. They can reflect anything they want to. And so in the Democratic Party, after the shock to the corporations of this leftish George McGovern winning the nomination in 1972 based upon grassroots kind of politicking, by 1980 they were able to fix the deck, load the deck up with these superdelegates. The superdelegates were put in place specifically so that a movement kind from below kind of candidacy could not win the Democratic nomination, because they'd have 700 and something superdelegates representing the status quo in the Democratic Party, representing the moneyed interests in the Democratic Party, to block them. So the Democratic Party's rules since 1980 have been specifically set up so that there will not be one man, one person, one vote. And if it happens, there are these 700 party stalwarts who can negate that vote. And that's by design.
Of course. Of course. In fact, as Jerry Frazier pointed out in his book, Toward an American Revolution, there's never been a presidential election has never been won by a majority of the adult citizens of this country. Never in its history.
And it was never planned. The founding fathers, as they call those son of a bitches, did not plan for there to be any kind of mass popular government.
No, they absolutely did not.
And in the first elections, only 10,000 people actually participated in the selection of a president. In the United States, it wasn't until the 1820s that the tally of voters reached more than a million. And by this time, there were like 15 or 20 million people in the United States.
And it was originally only white privileged property owners could vote, male.
That's right, and it was set up that way. Those were the checks and balances that Jefferson and Washington wanted to put in place, so they could check the ability of folks to depose rich slave owners like themselves, and they could balance their wealth against whatever majorities of white people even.
Yes, they didn't think that the majority should govern. They felt that the wealthy property owners should govern, and that the masses and of people. And at that time, of course, we know that even in the Declaration of Independence, the indigenous peoples were referred to as merciless savages, and it's still in there. And the you know, black people were counted as 3/5 of a human being, and were enslaved and had no voting rights, and women, although black men got the vote first, women didn't get the vote until the 1920s, for goodness sakes, about 50 years after the first black men were enfranchised.
And today, the United States has the lowest voting rate of any industrialized country in the world. And there are several reasons. One is obvious with this duopoly system, both the major parties controlled by corporations. There really is very little choice between the two. Much of the hoopla that's generated by the corporate media is designed to create the illusion of vast differences
Yes.
between the candidates and between the parties, differences that do not exist. For example, the Democratic primary of 2008, in the end, pitted two political twins against each other. That is Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And there never was a dime's worth of difference between these two people. But to hear the corporate media tell it, and to hear the Black Misleadership class, peanut gallery, tell it, this was a battle royal between contending world views, and the fate of the universe hinged upon which one of these clones of each other were going to win. Well, that's one of the reasons that the United States has such a low voter participation rate. But the other is that the rules are designed to keep the voter participation rate low. That's why we vote on Tuesday during the week, rather than on a weekend or taking the whole weekend, like lots of other folks do.
Other countries, yeah.
The United States has always tried to inhibit large turnouts of people.
Well, they're doing a bang-up job now, aren't they? They're really doing a good job. You know, like in Arizona, where they had people waiting for 6 hours, and they literally closed polls instead of opening them. It's insane.
Now, this is nothing new. This is the legacy of the original oligarchy, the oligarchy of the slaveocracy.
Oh yeah, and the framers referred to the people as scum, as the great beast. I mean, they had nothing but contempt for everyday people. So, and of course, you know, we see this manifested in Trump right now. I mean, blatantly. But I kind of like the fact that he's so blatant, because the others think the same way, but they're just, you know, they have code words and.
Well, that's how he caused this great fracture in the duopoly, and that is what is important about the 2016 election. It's not Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton. It's not even Donald Trump or Ted Cruz versus whoever. The real occurrence, the real happening, the real significance of what is happening today is that the duopoly system seems to be being destabilized. And you can't destabilize just one end of the duopoly, that is the Republican Party, without destabilizing the other end of the duopoly, the Democratic Party, because they're like binary star systems that in which the two stars circle around each other and around a common gravitational point in space. Anything that happens to one of them has an immediate effect upon the other. So even if the small uprising in the Democratic Party does not result in any kind of lasting fracture. We know that the Republican Party has really been brought to the brink. That it has been damaged. And how did Donald Trump do that? He did it by giving in raw form what the Republicans have been dog whistling to their mass base, certainly since '68, but really since '64 with Goldwater. That was the first attempt to make the Republican Party switch positions with the Democratic Party in terms of being the white man's party. And finally, Nixon went along with that too in 1968. So they've been sending out dog whistles to their white constituents, not delivering anything in terms of goods to these folks, but luring them into the party by making them feel that it's the place that where white people's interests will be taken care of and protected. Well, this globalized capitalist economy does not take care of anybody's interests except the owners. And so what Trump has done is speak the language of the white man's party in the raw. Now he doesn't use racist language against black folks because that's not politic anymore. But he substitutes it with Mexicans and Muslims and white people get the idea. I mean, we're in there too.
You know we are.
Of course we are. We're the main ingredient as always.
Sure.
And this has been a really, really interesting phenomenon because what we found, what the response to Trump demonstrated was that all these white folks cared about when they became affiliated with the Republican Party was the race question. They really didn't care about capital gains taxes. Not only do they not only were they not joining the Republican Party in order to vote for international trade bills, they actually hate globalization. It was always assumed that the right wing of the rightmost half of the duopoly would be the place that the most vicious warmongers lived. But here we have Donald Trump saying things that no serious candidate for president has ever said in my lifetime. That the United States should not have a nuclear umbrella that, quote, protects, unquote, anybody else. That the U.S. shouldn't be confronting Russia and China militarily, but should carry out that kind of competition economically. That if Saudi Arabia wasn't under the protection of the United States, that regime would go away. And he didn't sound like he was unhappy about that. The logic of Trump's foreign policy would be to close down most of those 1,000 U.S. foreign bases all over the world because the rest of the world, according to Trump, isn't paying the United States enough money. Trump has basically eliminated the national security excuse for the U.S. militarized empire and reduced it all to some kind of financial transaction. They don't pay us enough, and therefore we shouldn't be doing that. Now, and his base of support has tolerated this. They haven't abandoned him. It's as if that this whole Cold War, hot war, militarism really wasn't a big part of their agenda after all. Actually, their whole agenda was race, that they wanted America to be a white man's country, and they don't even care about all of this warmongering and saber rattling. Not enough to abandon their candidate.
Well, that's exactly what that's what they mean when they say "Make America Great Again." They really mean "Make America White Again."
That's all they mean is white.
Exactly.
But they're not necessarily talking about occupying the whole rest of the world. And if those people aren't the base constituency for U.S. militarism, then who is? the masses in the Democratic Party? I don't think so. This whole exercise, this experience, tends to reveal that all of this received wisdom that we have gotten constantly from corporate media, all of your life and my life, that the American people demand that there be U.S. tanks and troops everywhere in the world, and that there be this nuclear hair trigger in order to keep the United States safe and secure. That actually is not, it appears, to an opinion, a position that is embedded in most of the American public. Most people just think that the other guy thinks that way. But if it doesn't exist with Trump's people, then it really is not it's not a popular position.
Yeah, but you have some very powerful people in the offense industry and the Iron Triangle. You know, the Pentagon, the offense industry, and Congress, right? So voting.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
But
so,
we do see the emperor kind of naked because of the position that Trump took.
Exactly. But if he were to get into power, though, if he became the president, I don't think he'd have any more power than anybody else to stop the warmongers.
Or they kill him, as they kill anybody.
Exactly.
Who tried to
Because
dismantle.
I don't think any candidate or any individual is going to stop this war machine.
That's right.
I think it has to be the power of the masses. People
Yes.
have to stop it, and nobody else. And that means organize. But let's talk a little bit about to try to get on a positive trip so that we can.
I think it's positive when we find out that militarism is not as widespread as an ideology among even the most right-wing American elements as we thought it was. That's positive to me.
That is, you're right about that. But what I'm trying to get to is the people's demands, what we should be demanding as a people's platform. In other words, these candidates are running around talking about everything but what people really need. And for one thing, homelessness is endemic and outrageous at this point in time. San Francisco, you're coming to us from New Jersey, is that correct?
Yes.
Well, I don't know how New Jersey is, but San Francisco, one of the richest cities in the whole world, and probably the richest in the country. When I roll down 16th Street from the 16th Street BART, and I always have to pass these tents on streets where there's side streets where there are no businesses. I passed 3 tents lined up behind each other, and with chairs and things and pieces of furniture alongside of them, and assuming there were people inside of these tents. It's just such an outrage that every time you look up, the police in this city are doing sweeps and sweeping the homeless from wherever they happen to be and just moving them and dumping their stuff, trashing their stuff, bulldozing their few belongings, and it's become so inhumane. It's kind of mind-boggling, the lack of humanity that exists now. And it seems to me that, well, it's another outrage that none of the candidates is even talking about houseless or homeless people. The other thing is that with what happened in Flint, and it's happening in so many places, we need to be demanding clean water, healthy food, free education, affordable child care, living wage jobs, and all that good stuff. And of course, we need political party with which to organize and demand and develop such a platform. I also think that we should follow the Panther example that happened in 1971 when we organized the Philadelphia People's Revolutionary Constitutional Convention. And do you remember that?
Sure, I remember.
We want to talk about that? I was there. Were you there?
I briefly made the road trip and came right back to Jersey City.
Yeah, did you happen to catch Michael Setaway Tabor speech?
No.
Oh, it was magnificent. In any case, that was a convention that was organized by the Black Panther Party. It took a couple of years to organize to develop a platform. And it's still available. What was accomplished is available in Kathleen Cleaver's book, The Collection of Essays. George Katsiafikis wrote an essay, and it's in that, what's the title of the book? Imagination. I can't think of something Imagination in the Black Panther Party, anyway, by Kathleen Cleaver. And it was quite revolutionary. The results of that convention. Unfortunately, the repression that came down on us at that time, didn't allow any follow-up.
Well, in 1971, Richard Nixon, President Nixon, who of course was reviled by all of us at that time, had in principle agreed to a guaranteed national income. It in fact passed one House of Congress and then got stalled in another one, and then as the neoliberalism set in through the 70s, it just kind of faded away. We know that we could actually have a kind of a Medicare for all for less than the cost of a couple of carrier battle groups. Since a single payer kind of medical insurance would actually reduce the costs of health care.
It would eliminate the tons of money spent on administration.
Of course. We know that we could have free community college education for the cost of a carrier battle group or two. And the United States has 10.
Wow.
Just roaming around the world trying to intimidate people. So these kinds of minimal demands, and I think that they are not really revolutionary demands. They're reformist demands that a social democratic party ought to be making. They are affordable without even going for the jugular of the capitalist system, and so should fall within that kind of framework of people who might go through this Bernie Sanders process and decide that they want to organize a different kind of party. That's within the range of a social democratic party. You don't have to be a Marxist to demand free education, guaranteed shelter, health care, and such things as that.
Really? Because it's disgusting now that people can't even meet their very most basic needs in a society that is as rich as this one. It's obscene. And, in case some people who are viewing this program aren't aware of just how gross the disparities are, one of the more recent reports that came out, something like 65 or 62 or 65 individuals owned as much wealth as the combined incomes of half the world's population, which translates into about 350 billion people. So 62 individuals own as much as wealth as the combined wealth of 350 billion people. It's just mind-boggling. It's not 1% anymore. It's just a tiny fraction of 1% that's really owning all this wealth. And now the Panama Papers have come out, and it's being exposed, or it's in the process of exposing what some of us are already pretty well aware of these tax havens. And what I wasn't aware of, I was aware of the Cayman Islands and Switzerland and Ireland, but I wasn't aware of Delaware and Wyoming as tax havens.
That's right, and that's why U.S. Political personalities aren't going to figure in Panama Papers types of lists, because the United States itself is a tax haven and is moving more towards perfecting the tax haven here at home rather than further away from it.
And how do they manage that?
What do you mean?
How do they hide money right here?
By setting up banking systems in which you don't have to really report whose money it is. That is, it is the money of a corporation who has a legal representative, but the beneficiaries, that is, who actually is the end user of the money, doesn't have to be listed, and that's considered to be not just a privacy right, but it's considered to add value. This is the kind of language they use. Add value to the American banking sector. That is, the sector is more attractive because it keeps a secret whose money it
So this
really
is perfectly
is.
legal.
Sure. And
It's unethical, but it's legal.
States like Delaware, that is their comparative advantage. That's one of the words they like to use too. Their comparative advantage is that it's quite friendly to financial criminals, and that's what makes it the great state of Delaware, and they're quite proud of it.
You just wonder how these people live with themselves, with the havoc they're wreaking and
the capitalist mind is a criminal mind. It does not have the morality that we see in human societies around the globe. It thinks in terms of acquisition, destruction of other people's property in order to increase the value of whatever you have in your pocket, comparative advantages that make poverty an asset, and that's why Haiti is a great place to invest, because it's so damn poor. I mean, they invert morality, but that's part of the logic of the capitalist system. But there are people whose brains actually function that way, and they are the leaders of the country.
Well, we can't really have a complete discussion of electoral politics in America without touching on AIPAC. So I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit on the American Israeli Political Action Committee.
Well, of course, that is the Israel lobby, and they are killers, and they do not just wreak vengeance against people who vote against what they consider the interests of Israel to be. They will destroy you if it appears that you might even be thinking about rejecting the next demand that Israel makes of the United States. They're quite aggressive. They don't just defend Israel's interests. They create what Israel's interests will be in terms of how that's seen in American politics. And so at the height in 2014 of the massacre, the slaughter that Israel was waging in Gaza, which ultimately they killed about 2,500 Palestinians, including at least 500 children. As that slaughter was being waged, AIPAC forced the U.S. Congress to pass a resolution endorsing Israel's, and this is code word, Israel's right to defend itself. In other words, effectively endorsing the slaughter of Palestinians. And they forced the Congress to do this at the moment of the slaughter, to make the point that you can't stop Israel. So this is quite clearly the most efficient of of the lobbies in the United States. Now, I don't think that one should say that AIPAC is the strongest lobby in the United States. I think that the reason it gets that reputation is because the foundational capitalist lobbies, the ones that are always fighting for legislation that defends the capitalist system itself, are so much a part of the topography of the furniture, just the whole structure of politics in the United States. You don't even notice them. Those are the real pillars of lobbyism. But AIPAC, as a lobby for a foreign entity, certainly stands out, and it is the most aggressive. It's like a vicious little dog.
Yeah, and from what I understand, nobody can keep their seat in Congress without its support.
In 2014, both houses of Congress unanimously, nobody dared vote against that resolution. About 8 Congressional Black Caucus members, after they supinely voted for the pro-Israel resolution, then called a press conference to announce that they were examining issues regarding security and rights of Palestinians, but they didn't have the courage to vote against the resolution. And their little press conference was just to say, to send some kind of signal that they are the liberal wing or whatever. It was pitiful.
I know, and Bernie Sanders, I thought he would be better, but when it was, what was it, 2013, that operation, what did they call it, Operation Led, the one that killed 2,500 Palestinians, and including 500 children.
2014.
What was an Operation Cast Lead or something?
Something like that.
Something like that. But, you were talking about the bill that was they were going through Congress at the time, calling for more money for Israel's, while the siege was going on and while they were devastating, bombing the hell out of Gaza, they voted more money for more military aid, and Bernie Sanders was one who went right along with it.
They almost all go along. They all do go along with it. This was not uniformly the case, even not so long ago. You had Cynthia McKinney in Congress, who did not roll over for Israel, and we also had Earl Hilliard.
But they also didn't wound up losing their seats too.
In 2002, that's when the corporate money and the AIPAC money combined to launch the Great Purge of the Black Caucus, and that got rid of Cynthia the first time and rid of Earl Hilliard. But it put a fear of Zionism into the rest of the caucus, and they didn't raise a peep about Israel after that, because it was shown that if you do, then we will fund a challenger for you.
Oh yeah, that's how they got rid of Cynthia, I know, and probably Hilliard too. But also talk a little bit about, oh boy, lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, I got it back. We mentioned earlier, you were talking about how black folks in the southern states particularly were casting their votes for in the primaries for Hillary. And it amazes me, and I'm sure you have some question about how they could vote for her when the Clintons, gave us welfare reform. I mean, they brought in the effective the Anti-Terrorist Effective Death Penalty Act of 1994 that provided all the help states wanted to build as many prisons as they wanted, and they came up with the 3 strikes law and a whole bunch of new reasons to execute people. And I mean, they were really responsible for the in large part for the dramatic increase in in the mass incarceration that we're dealing with today, and how black folks can want Clintons in the House, it just amazes me. But
The first thing I'd like to say is the Clinton phenomenon is it is an anti-black phenomenon. Clinton and Al Gore are co-founders of the Democratic Leadership Council. The Democratic Leadership Council was founded by white Southern politicians, Democrats, in the 80s, largely as a response to Jesse Jackson's two campaigns. And his two presidential campaigns essentially were huge black voter registration drives. And what that resulted in was an acceleration of the process that had been going on basically since 1968 and Nixon's Southern strategy. That is, the Republican Party becoming the white man's party, replacing the Dixiecrat Democrats, who had previously been the white man's party in the South. And so there had been this huge attrition of white people from the Democratic Party. And here comes Jesse Jackson in 84 and 88 and is scooping even more black folks into the party. The problem that white Democratic politicians in the South had then was, well, damn, the Democratic Party parties in several states were essentially becoming black parties. I'm talking about in South Carolina, in Mississippi, and Louisiana, and to varying degrees in Georgia and other states. So how is white leadership going to maintain its control over what, in terms of the rank and file, is a black party? It's just a matter of time before the leadership of the party reflects the membership of the party. And so they were in a crisis, and so they put out a call to the corporate world, and they said what we need to do is curb the influence of blacks and unions on the Democratic Party, but we need money, and that was the creation of the Democratic Leadership Council. They tapped into national corporate funds, and that meant that these white Democratic leaders, mayors, governors, etc., they maintained their power over the party because they had the money. All right. So it didn't matter that the Democratic Party in South Carolina is 80% black. The white guys got the money because they got the corporate money, and this is one of the reasons that these black Democrats down south are one of the reasons that they are further to the right in the spectrum than their northern counterparts. It's because they are beholden to this kind of DLC generated money. So that's what
they're getting they're getting a piece of the political pie.
Right, and they can be they can be made or broken by that kind of money in their little districts. So this was Bill Clinton and Al Gore's contribution, and so Bill Clinton becomes the first DLC president. Barack Obama became the second.
Right.
Now, in terms of so I'm saying all that to say he is the anti-black candidate. All right, that's what makes it really so crazy that some blacks would call him the first black president, and that black folks in some kind of illusion remember him to be their champion. His whole political career is an anti-black career. It was to stem the tide of black influence in the Democratic Party, to bring it under control by combating it with corporate money. And he was quite successful in that. So he's the anti-black candidate. But the larger picture, you don't understand that unless you understand the duopoly. The duopoly is the great trap. The duopoly, in which you have two parties, both of them...
We've got about 2 minutes.
both of them controlled by corporations. In the United States, it being a racist country, one of those parties is always going to be a white man's party. There's always been a white man's party in the United States. That leaves one other party that is not not organized as a white supremacist engine, and that's the only place that black people can go. So it is a trap. All right, but there is a trap within the trap, because if you buy into the logic that you must vote Democratic because you must defeat the white man's party, then you must, therefore, support the strongest candidate in the Democratic Party, the one who is best able to defeat the Republican, and that would be the one with the most money, which would be the most right-wing and pro-corporate. And that's why our people wind up being on the wrong side of the Democratic Party, even within those terms.
Well, you sure spelled out why we need a new revolutionary political party, and at the same time, I like folks to realize that the amount of money that's being poured into this election is, oh my goodness, they're talking it's going to be $5 to $10 billion. They're estimating, so much more than the last one. And
that's right. You know, Bernie could never have kept up that $27 once he got out of the primary thing, because we get into the billion range after June.
Right. I just want to, before we run clean out of time, I want to share. Oh, I can't. Anyway, I can share one quote. George Jackson said, "Fascism has temporarily succeeded under the guise of reform." And so reform won't get it. We have to have a revolution. And thank you, Glen Ford, so much for being our guest here on Freedom is a Constant Struggle. Thank Andrew Montoya, and thank you, viewers, for tuning in to Freedom is a Constant Struggle. We'll be back on May 5th. We're here on the first and third Thursdays of the month, and you can see a rebroadcast of this on Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Thank you again, and all power to the people.